Legacy planning does a lot and it focuses on a bigger picture. What your needs are change throughout that entire process. What are my assets? Where are they located? What type are they? You can compare it to making a grocery list. It's really just getting yourself to take that first step and what do you want to achieve? If you have not planned out your next 10 years, you're behind.
Welcome to Inside the Vault Knowledge Hub. Join us as we answer all your burning questions, from precious metals to second passports and IRA investments. Each episode, we tackle a new topic and bring you insights straight from the experts. Let's dive in and unlock the knowledge together.
Welcome to SWP's Inside the Vault Knowledge Hub. This is where we discuss all things our clients have asked us over the years outside of and including precious metals. From second passports to IRA investment, we will take a different topic each episode and bring you the answers from the experts themselves. Today, I welcome Cheyenna Calderon, Senior Relationship Manager and Head of Private Banking at NCB Cayman Limited. Cheyenna brings over 2 decades of experience in international wealth structuring, fiduciary services, and private banking. At NCB Cayman, a boutique institution backed by the strength of NCB Financial Group, which is publicly traded on the Trinidad and Jamaican stock exchanges, she helps high net worth individuals and families craft thoughtful legacy plans that balance financial security with personal values. NCB Cayman operates a Class A banking license in one of the world's most trusted offshore jurisdictions, offering bespoke private banking and wealth management with a client-first, Caribbean-rooted approach. Cheyenna is here today to help us break down a practical 90-day plan for legacy planning, how to take action, protect what matters, and set the next generation up for success. Cheyenna, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, let's start with the very bare bones definition of legacy planning. What does legacy planning mean to you, and how does that differ from, wills or other types of estate planning?
When I first ever heard about the term legacy planning many, many years ago, I really related it to what I wanted to leave the future generations of my family, not just my daughters, but what I wanted them to tell their children, who I was, what I was all about, what I did during my lifetime, and why I made the decisions I made. Legacy planning and traditional estate planning, they overlap. It's given. They go hand in hand, but it's a different view looking at each of them. Traditional estate planning, it's rooted in the financial and legal side of things, how to effectively ensure that your assets are passed down and distributed according to what you want and your wishes, basically, after your death. Legacy planning does a lot and it focuses on a bigger picture. It discusses the things while you're alive. What you want to happen, kind of your family values, how do you want to pass those down, your life lessons, charitable contributions. Maybe there's something that is very important in your lifetime and you want that importance to be conveyed to your children and your grandchildren for generations to come. It also includes things like family traditions. I've seen people require that if they want their annual distribution, the family has to get together. Imagine forcing them to come back as a family unit and really spend that quality time because that was important to the patriarch or the matriarch. I look at the two together, and it's really legacy planning is passing on who you are as well as what you've accumulated during your lifetime.
That's very interesting, and taking my own family into consideration there. I'm sure that if, my grandmother required all of us to get together in order to receive any money or any assets from her, we might be waiting a while.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes into the next question. Legacy planning, I think sounds overwhelming. It sounds like something that, it's far out. We all expect to live until we're, 100. How do you help clients kind of change their view of that and get them to go to work on this and communicate that it's important to do now?
Yeah. One of the biggest mistakes that people make, every individual, they think they have more time than they really do to get started. They keep putting it off, and you can't put it off. It unfortunately, but typically takes a catastrophic event to really decide that you have to make this important. It's a catalyst motivator for a lot of people. Depending on what jurisdiction you reside in, where you hold your assets, the easiest way to start is just to start compiling a list. I think about, okay, what are my assets? Where are they located? What type are they? You can compare it to making a grocery list. If you kind of want to bring it back into your everyday life and equate it to something. Every time you need something, you open the fridge and something's missing, you write it on a little list on the refrigerator so that when you go to the store, you just don't forget and you're not just piling things into your cart. When it comes to, the beginning steps, you open a bank account, add it to the list. You open an investment account, add it to the list. You buy a car, add it to the list. You buy a home, add it to the list. And you just, during your lifetime, you keep adding these things to your list. So at any point in time, you know what you have, where it's at, and know that it is incorporated in your overall plan. And this is actually the very first step to creating your master plan.
Okay, so in that regard, so we basically have set out a 5-phase checklist, from inception. I had this idea to following through and actually executing it. So phase number 1, we've identified as clarity, which I think is what you're getting into there.
Yes.
And that involves not only the physical inventory, taking stock of the assets, but as you mentioned, also, outlining your goals and, the legacy outside of just the assets themselves. Let's take a step back for somebody who hasn't, as they buy a house, they add it to the list. As they, buy a car or whatever the case may be. For someone who's already behind in that regard, how do you start that? That's an incredibly difficult thing to...
It is. I have found if you use this masterful thing, Google, and you say, give me a template for a will. Right? What does a will consist of? There's a lot of templates that can pop up, and it kind of walks you through the steps of what you should be thinking about. And it's not just a list of assets. It's if you have children, if something happens to you, and they're minor children, who takes over guardianship? Who do you want to take over guardianship of those children? What decisions do you want made for your children? If you have family members amongst different religions, it's an important topic. So a basic will walk you through the very, the sections of what you should be thinking about. And I think that is a key point. If you're behind the game, search up the basic parameters for a will and make sure it's in your jurisdiction.
Right.
Always remembering that a will may not cross jurisdictions. So we have instances where we have clients with property in the UK. They have a vacation home in Jamaica, or they have a rental unit in the Cayman Islands. Yet they may live in the United States or they may live in Canada. How do you make sure that if you're a Canadian resident and you set up a will in Canada and you think you have everything with all your foreign assets listed, that doesn't equate that will is going to be honored in those foreign jurisdictions? So just doing a little research, I tell people, if you have time to flick through Facebook or, swipe through TikToks and look at those things, you have time to just maybe set aside 10 minutes, and just start. Right. It's really just getting yourself to take that first step. And what do you want to achieve? Defining what you want to achieve.
Interesting. Okay. And then that takes us kind of into the second phase, which is structure. Now, once you've, kind of set your vision and you've got the inventory roughly, how do you start to build the legal and financial structure, whether it's a will, an estate plan, or legacy planning, which, we're discussing now?
As most people say, find your crew, find your team. It actually is a very hard part of the entire thing. I'm from a very tiny community in the States. That's where I grew up, and I never knew a lawyer or an accountant or anything until I got into my college years. It wasn't part of our daily life. We didn't understand that nature. We didn't understand the financial services nature. You open a savings account, you work your job, You have your little fun, and that was kind of your world growing up. As you get if you're in that position, you really have to start looking at people in a different light. What can that person offer? If I have a conversation with them, reach out to a coworker. Hey, have you ever done this? Who do you, if you have, who did you trust? Do you have a lawyer that you use? And it's really just kind of having those conversations with people in your community, your, clergy members, people in your church, people in your, school. You can go back to teachers. You have a lot of people have lifetime relationships with the teachers from when they were a child. And you can go to college, you talk to your professor. Hey, I want to get started on something. Do you know a lawyer in the community, somebody who could help me with these things? But finding that team, my father always told me, you have to have 3 important men in your life: somebody who could cook, somebody who could clean, and somebody who could fix the car. and I equate that, and I look back at that, and I have to laugh because he was so true. That if you go out, there's certain people you have to have in your life if you want to make sure your legacy and your assets are going to last for generations. I find that just with the issuance of a will, if you have a will, you can easily add people as an authorized signatory on a bank account. So if it's just you add your wife. If it's just you're unmarried, you add a sister, you add a brother. That's the quickest way to transfer assets in that area. But what happens with a will, you get into a little bit more detail, and then you kind of hit that later stage in life where there's so many more assets. Yeah. You're in that later stage of life, and oh gosh, what do I do? Finding an accountant, finding a tax advisor, finding a global tax advisor, finding a global financial planner. They're all very important, especially when you get into the high net worth and the ultra high net worth realm.
Right.
What your needs are change throughout that entire process.
A lot of what you do obviously is working with high net worth families and individuals, but I think this goes for, everyone. And at what point, of wealth, I guess, do you go from, a traditional will to something a little bit more structured and in depth? Is there, kind of a number that you have in mind, or does it apply for anyone?
I think where a lot of people make mistakes is that these plans are ever changing. It's just not one and done. You don't just sit down and draft a will and walk away and know that that's going to take care of everything. It's not. Right. I say different stages of your life. If you can equate it to the different stages, you're just starting out, you have your job. Maybe you don't need a will yet because the house, it's going to go to an immediate family member. But without the will, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So for myself personally, I'm a single mom of 2 daughters. My family members' names are on my house that I have. If there's not somebody there, I've just left a mess for my children to clean up. As I got later, I call it a midlifer. You get married, you have children, you might start accumulating additional assets. You get a little savings set aside. You're setting up a college plan for your child. I think that is where, you have to look at the financial benefit of setting up even a living trust based on the jurisdiction you're in. U.S. has living trust. So you can set up this trust while you're alive and you can control it, you can run it. I think that's kind of that midlife range, something where you can still be involved, still make decisions, but if something happens to you, it's going to go where you want it to go. Then you get into that further stage of life where your kids have graduated from college, you may be looking to sell a business that you've built up during your lifetime. Maybe you hit it big in, crypto, or you've all of a sudden, something major financial may happen for you. And it might be an event, but it also might be that You're now at a point where you've amalgamated this mass, and you're really thinking, you know what? I know I'm thinking about future generations, what I want to do. And at that stage, you can even start it earlier on, but at that stage, you better have that legacy planning already set up, ready to go. Because that's the time where we think we're infallible. We think that nothing's going to happen to us. It could happen at 20, but typically the 40s, the 50s, those are the ages where you really start feeling the pressure of your immortality. And a lot of people do not like to talk about it. Yeah. I say to myself that if you cannot say the word death, you really have to learn how to cope with it and grapple with the term. Right. I unfortunately, again, was faced with it at an early age, mid-40s. And you stop and think, why didn't I think about this before? But it's not a normal conversation we have. Right. When you're doing your private banking or you're, buying a car or buying a house, you're not thinking about what's going to happen 10 years down the road. I had a school guidance counselor, and I remember her to this day because she said, if you have not planned out your next 10 years, you're behind. Plan it out. Just put some goals around it. So from the time you're 20 and you're entering the professional workforce, you better start thinking about what you're going to do 10 years from now with everything that you want to do and you've accomplished. That's cool. And that really is the crux of taking charge early. That end stage, I call it end of professional career. The trusts and the structures and the cross-jurisdictional planning, it all has to be in place by that time. So again, you can look at it in phases, but make sure that you're thinking the phase ahead and the phase ahead and have it planned from that time.
I'm sitting here thinking of 20-year-old me and going, boy, I wish that I had listened to this advice back then. But it's the old adage, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The second best time is today. So, for those that might be a little behind the 8 ball and, needing to do this sort of thing, the time to do it is now.
It's now.
That segues really nicely into the next phase, which is protection. So, we live in a very uncertain world at the moment. Do you have any advice on, creative yet compliant and legal ways of asset protection, be it through a trust or some sort of other entity?
I think really when you step back and you look at the plan and the goal you're trying to achieve, if you're global based, you're all over the place, you have assets all over the place, it's different. It's a different world. You're now looking, I have someone who has properties in like 15 countries. It's like, what? Like, how do you put that into something? Where do you go? And I'll throw the segue into the Cayman Islands. Cayman Islands is a tax neutral jurisdiction. If you're dealing globally around the world, why would you want anything other than a tax neutral jurisdiction to set up something?
Right.
If your trust is there, and it's not necessarily a tax play. It's not that. It's a jurisdiction that has high regard for, the court systems and quick changing with the time legislation. Products, trust structures, corporate structures that are useful and relevant, not an old structure that may not work in today's environment. You get to that point where you form from the top down. Okay, I've got these little things in the jurisdictions. Maybe I have my wills there, or maybe I just decide, I am settling all of these assets into a trust. There's an overarching trust that now holds all of your properties, holds all of your companies, and you come on as a director of the company. You find that company or person who you want to be the trustee, who you trust, with your assets. That's a hard decision to make for a lot of people.
Right.
And it's hard in the fact that, are they going to honor your wishes? Because when you develop a trust, you can write a letter of wishes, and depending on the type of trust. You know what? When I die, these are the kind of things that I hope the trustee takes into account. I want to make sure that my grandchildren go to college. So I want to make sure there's a little money set aside, specifically for them to go to a four-year university. And if they decide they don't want to, you know what? When they turn 25 and they realize how hard they've worked, and they can start a career, then you know what? Then we'll distribute the money to them. But all of that from a tax neutral jurisdiction allows you to handle assets across the globe. Maybe it's that you're U.S. and Canada, and we were just talking. I'm from Michigan, and you're, from across the bridge, across the way, right, into Canada. And when I think about how many people are so close to a border of countries, and you may have assets in both jurisdictions, is a trust necessary? It depends. It depends on what you want for the legacy of what you have. A will may not cut it, because typically when a will is done, the assets are gone within one generation. When you've got a trust set up with a legacy plan, it could last for many generations.
Well, and I want to caveat that, because that was actually the next phase, was execution and ensuring that your plan is implemented, whether that be through, advisors, family, or, through multiple jurisdictions. So that actually kind of covers that question. But the last phase being activation of your legacy, how do you help clients to basically, make sure that their legacy is created and implemented with intention?
With your core group of people, with your team, with your financial advisor, with your private banker, with your lawyer, with your tax advisor, I always suggest to people, if you have never gotten them all in a room together, you've failed yourself, right? From my standpoint as a private banker, I may see your transactions rolling through your account. I may be speaking with the investment advisor who may be in the same, location as us or within our group, and we're talking. But if I don't ask you questions about, hey, this was your plan, this is what you wanted to do, you don't pay attention to those life events. Oh, congratulations, you just had a child. Hey, did you set up a life insurance for this child from the day of birth? Because if they have a medical problem, guess what? They may not get insurance. And then later on down in their life, they can't have a life insurance policy to help them or help their children. So getting all of your crew in the room and making sure that plan is reviewed, talked about, discussed, any major events that may happen, that is really activating your plan and working as a team. And you want that team. You don't want one individual. A thing that had just happened recently, a large portfolio of clients from a referral source that I had, the person passed away, the trustee passed away. And there wasn't a plan in place of who's going to take over, because you always look to somebody who's older and more experienced. But if you have a single person dealing with all of your stuff and that person all of a sudden is just gone, you're lost again. Right. So having a team of people with succession planning of who those people are too, that's really activating your plan. Me as a private banker, my part, you have a child, did you do this? Hey, you want to buy a house? You know what? Let's take a look at your assets and make sure, that you'll be able to afford these things and still maintain the lifestyle that you have, and the investments are performing how they should. Maybe we should tweak them a bit. Maybe that cash that we have sitting, we could put it into play in some other ways to, better your performance of your portfolio, make a little bit more money. Maybe it's setting up a segregated account now for college. We want to just push that off to the side and say, you know what, this is untouchable. We're going to start making some money on it and look at the returns over 18 years so that when your child turns 17 or 18, that money is ready to go for university. Yeah, we deal with inflation every day in universities. It just seems, I remember the cost when I was going to university. It pales in comparison to what I'm paying for my 19-year-old right now. Sure does. at different worlds. But make that activation part of it a continuous process.
Right.
Don't let it stagnate.
Right.
And the best advice from my side as a private banker, keep those people informed. Just how you're going to, talk to your wife about a major event, you and your wife need to speak to somebody about that major event.
Right.
Because if you don't share it outside your immediate circle, something may happen that can cause you to lose assets or now cost you more tax when you didn't plan appropriately.
Sure. Interesting. And I guess this kind of parlays into a bonus question that I just thought of is how often do you review this? And I mean, you're saying, as these life events come up, but is there, do you recommend, an actual sit down annual review with, whoever this advisor is, whether it's, the trustee, or is it more just on a case by case basis as you go along?
I think it's really what you want. What's a part of your plan? Do you want to be heavily involved? Right. If you want to be heavily involved, a phone call every month is important.
Wow.
If you trust the person, and you've given them your parameters, I want to be a little bit more conservative. I'm getting on later in life. I don't want to take the risks I took when I was younger. When you're younger, you can afford to lose a little bit more than when you're in your 50s and 60s. So, it really depends on how involved you want to be. But annually, I say is great, at least annually.
Okay, that's great. And one last question, because you mentioned the Cayman Islands specifically a couple of moments ago. We get this question a lot from our clients. They reach out and say, how do I open a bank account in the Cayman Islands? How do I go about, having some sort of exposure there? And I mean, perhaps it could be through a trust, for example, but, historically, and what I have told them, up until today is, it's very difficult to even open a bank account in the Cayman Islands. And I have the inclination that you think that it might not be. How, what do I tell clients when they reach out and ask, how do I at least open that door to the Cayman Islands?
We, in our organization, we take a very active role from day one. We get referral sources from corporate service providers, from lawyers, accountants, trust providers. And if we are brought in as a financial institution very early on, we can understand what their needs are, understand the people, do our checks, do a lot of that stuff preemptively before the structures are even set up.
Right.
We do a pre-clearance model where we take all the factors, names of the companies and passports and things like that, and we look at it to make sure we can take on this business, because every institution has their own can and cannots.
Right.
Want and want, do not want. So if you come into the jurisdiction saying, okay, let me just investigate what I have to do, I do the old world adage of pick up the phone.
Right.
Pick up the phone and have a conversation with somebody. You can scan the yellow pages. Oh, maybe not. They're not around much anymore.
I was going to say.
But you can scan the internet and, you just pick up the phone and you start calling, or you send an email and say, hey, I'd like to speak to somebody. This is what my plans are. Could you give me a little guidance who I could speak to? Is there someone at your organization?
What?
And you would be amazed at that simple email. And don't just send it to one, because you do want to shop around. You do want to make sure you're in the right place with the right people who are willing to walk you through the process. Right. And a lot of times you may not get a response to your email, but if you send them, you never know what's going to open up. Ultimately, you call someone like yourself or myself. Who's going to pick up the phone, who's going to answer the emails. We have requirements, not necessarily job requirements, but professional requirements. Like if I get an email, minimum 1 to 2 days, especially if I'm traveling or on the road or something, that is a minimum turnaround time for us to answer. And if I can't help you, the biggest thing is having that arsenal of people and professionals around you that you can refer to. I'm a cross referral person. If I have somebody who wants to set up a trust, I do a few questions. What's your asset value? What are the key points that you want to have happen? Is it just an offshore company that you want to do some global business? Is it maybe a trust for a larger estate, cross-jurisdictional? They're all different people in Cayman, and they're all different organizations. Some do quite a wide variety. Some just do one integral piece. So having that arsenal around you and knowing those professionals and where you can push them, one phone call could get you opened up to everyone you need.
Well, and like you said, cast a wide net, but start with NCB Cayman first. And Cheyenna, Cheyenna, it's been great having you on. I'm sure we'll do this again further down the line. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to Inside the Vault Knowledge Hub. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it to be insightful. Be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. Join us next time for more expert advice and answers to your questions. See you next time on Inside the Vault Knowledge Hub.